Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, develops a system called the 100-year flood, which is just a term that they use to help city planners prepare infrastructure changes so that they can kind of understand, what might a kind of worst-case scenario be if there were storm surge and flooding in Boston and the other big cities. So what this graphic shows you is Boston, this is Back Bay, so some of the big landmark areas in downtown Boston: Commonwealth Avenue, Newbury Street, Copley the Esplanade, the John Hancock Tower, that sort of area of Boston, and what it might look like as sea levels rise and storm surges increase. So what you see in the hatched area, the sort of dark blue lines, right now that is the 100-year flood zone. But as, of course, sea level rise, the 100-year flood zones are going to rise. So what you see with the projected 100-year flood zone in 2100 is very frequent flooding of very substantial parts of what is now Boston. The sea level rise projections that were used in this report were based on the most recent IPCC report, and at that time the IPCC did not include projections about projected changes in Greenland melting, because I don't know why they didn't do it. The science.
Too much uncertainty.
Too much uncertainty, so they didn't make any projections. But over the past couple of years, that science has progressed, and like Cameron indicated earlier, there's now a lot of evidence suggesting that sea level rise will be substantially higher than the IPCC projected. And so using those new sea level rise projections, what we might expect is that what I described as a possible 100-year flood in 2100 will actually be high tide in 2100. It's extremely unlikely that this is going to happen. I mean, Boston will and Massachusetts will take pains to protect the city as best as it can, and there's a lot of engineering solutions and other things that can be done to help protect this incredibly valuable part of the Boston landscape. But I just ask you to think about, if this part of Boston is seeing high tides that look like this, what kinds of investments will have to be made by the state of Massachusetts, by the city of Boston, by the people of the U.S. to protect Boston from this kind of damage? So when anybody says to you, oh, it's going to be expensive to reduce our emissions and to change our energy system, I want you to think about how expensive this is going to be, and what this is going to look like in New York City, which is almost as bad, and what this is going to look like all up and down the coastline of the East Coast. So there are tremendous costs associated with not doing anything to reduce our emissions. And we don't talk about that very much. But I think that's a really important part of this discussion now, is what kinds of expenses we're talking about to protect ourselves from a changing climate, and what will happen if we don't.
This excerpt is brought to you by the Massachusetts School of Law, the leader of reform in legal education and a leader in multimedia education for the public. To view the full interview and for a full listing of MSL's programs, log on to mslaw.edu.